My name is Shona Hendricks from CoachParry.com, and let's dive into why mobility is so important for runners.
So before we get stuck into the specifics of mobility, let's just quickly touch on why it's important. Mobility is absolutely vital to how well you run. If you have tightness and poor mobility around your joints, it affects the quality of your stride. It does affect the power you're able to put into each of those strides. And by having that limitation, you are risking, again, how well you run, how fast you run, and there is an increased risk of injury along with that. We talk about and we understand the need for mobility in runners, but it becomes more crucial as we age for us to be doing regular mobility work in order to keep ourselves and our stride or our running performance as optimal as possible.
Now that you know why mobility is so important, let's dive into how often, okay? Again, I always hear runners saying, oh, I'm not stretching after my run, I'm not getting my flexibility in every day. And this is where mobility and flexibility are probably the same, is that mobility every day would be so beneficial to your running. Here at Coach Parry, we are massive advocates of strength training, and 3 strength sessions or 2 to 3 strength sessions a week is probably the ideal, depending on your age and your ability. But with mobility, it's not a case that less is more. More is probably more when it comes to mobility. So doing something where you're loosening up the aspects of your hips or your ankles or your shoulders, if that's something where you struggle from a posture perspective, then yes, doing something every day is really, really going to benefit your running. A lot of people often go, okay, well, this is yet another thing I now have to fit into my schedule. How do I fit this in? We're not talking about doing an hour session of mobility. This is something you can do as you wake up, first thing in the morning. It's quite a nice way to get yourself going for the day, or before your run. Do a 5 to 10 minute little mobility sort of workout, get into your run. Really, really beneficial to get the most out of that run as well.
Let's look at some of the areas that we should be focusing on from a mobility perspective. 2 of the main problem areas we tend to find in runners is poor ankle mobility as well as poor hip mobility. Now I mentioned those 2, we're talking runners, we talk mostly lower limb sort of injuries and problems. That's not to neglect any upper body work. A really big focus that we like to incorporate is upper body or shoulder mobility rather, which will also have an effect on your running posture and how you keep yourself upright. More often than not, we all work jobs that are stuck behind a desk. We might be slouched over quite a lot, and that all transfers into how tight we are and how immobile we are in our running posture as well. If we start to talk lower limb and hip mobility as a prime example here, you might have experienced a little bit of knee pain, whether it's on the front of the knee, inside of the knee, outside of the knee. More often than not, that pain is actually a referred pain from higher up in the chain. Biggest problem often is going to be poor hip mobility. If your hip flexors are tight, if your hips are immobile, what that's doing is it creates almost a misalignment in how your muscles are contracting or pulling in one direction, how your patella or your kneecap tracks in its groove as well. So all of those aspects often come from one simple problem on fixing hip mobility. If we can get that solved, I can tell you now you're almost going to get rid of a lot of the knee pain, unless it's obviously a more of a trauma-focused type knee pain. But we really need to focus on range of motion around a particular joint that corrects and rectifies biomechanics, which helps your running gait, how efficiently you're running, and does highly reduce that risk of injury.
Now that you know that mobility is one of those things that's really, really going to impact your running, we have put together a mobility flow series. It's going to take you 5 minutes every day to go through the whole flow and the whole series, and it's going to be massively, massively beneficial to your running. You can click on the link to download that right now. Don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel to see more of our videos.